starting to cue the chickens.
Cue the chickens. Now the peace of Jesus. Now, regardless of religion, anyone who spends a lot of time trying to work out what will happen in the future is likely to suffer from anxiety, especially with the wars and rumors of wars, and the insane proliferation of the weapons of war. Well, who's making these weapons? It's people who's afraid of their enemies. And that's not God, not Jesus, but human beings. We didn't have to develop them. We could have cut the funding from the war machines and poured those funds into more constructive technologies. But we've been too afraid. We have not loved our enemies and prayed for those who persecute us, as Jesus taught. Well, we have feared our enemies and tried our best to threaten them into submission, if not actively engaged in wiping them from the face of the earth. And as a result, we are constantly poised on the brink of disaster, one bad decision away from nuclear annihilation. Now, anyone who blames God for this situation is missing the point of what Jesus actually taught. He taught us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. And how many of us actually do that? He also taught that perfect love drives out all fear. And the way to overcome anxiety is to stop thinking about anxiety-provoking doomsday scenarios and concentrate instead on spending each moment of our lives engaged in agape, or self-sacrificing love. The opportunities to act out of agape present themselves every single day, if we have eyes to see. And if we make a commitment to love as best as we can, eventually living in the present, and being on the alert to make that present moment better for those around us, well, it becomes a habit, and we don't even have to think about it. The world is full of anxious people. There are also people in the world who have, at some point in their lives, decided not to live in fear, but to live in love. Now, I don't know how many people who live fearful, or how many don't, but in my experience, more people seem to be fearful of much, including God. But God is love. But we can choose not to love, and instead choose the path of fear. Fear is a seedbed for even more negative emotions, such as resentment, unforgiveness, and the desire for revenge. Yeah, everything comes up on a strife, doesn't it? So we have the freedom to spend our lives resenting and being anxious about the fact that we have physical bodies which deteriorate and one day will cease to function altogether. We have free will, so we can choose to ignore the teachings of Jesus and decide that God is not really the things that he claims the Father to be. But if we choose to fear instead of choosing to love, do we not as individuals and as a species create the very circumstances which makes those doomsday scenarios a distinct possibility? Now here's a thought. What if we actually took Jesus' teachings seriously? What might happen then? There was a great debate within the church about whether Revelation should be included in all the canon of Scripture. It could have gone either way, but the decision was made to include it, so that we must now wrestle with it. It is one of those more difficult books to integrate into the Christian worldview. In one view, it is a highly stylized, apocalyptic book in the Hebrew tradition, which refers to events which were taking place at the time which it was written. People writing protest literature about the imperial powers who were oppressing them tended to disguise their descriptions because naming the enemy in terms in writing and about what they wanted God to do to them would have been an act of bravery bordering on suicide.
But they wanted to revenge.
Yeah, they had to say it somehow, didn't they? Be that as it may, Revelation can also read symbolically, because it could refer to any future where human beings have failed to learn from the cycles of violence. This is what we have covered ourselves with ever since our earliest ancestors figured out that a heavy stick could be used as a murder weapon. Revelation is a difficult book, but I think if you read it for its symbolic content, it is a book that describes the reality that human beings have actually created because we turn our backs on God. Yeah? We don't choose to be born into an imperfect world, but we do have a choice about how to cope with the reality of the human experience. I, for one, do not think there is any such thing as easy faith. And I don't think that hiding from the responsibility of actively choosing to love and goodness is enough. We can choose to hate God for giving us free will and the opportunity to exercise it, but I don't think that's going to help. Now, the way out of a life of fear is narrow, and it does require a commitment. But until you have pursued that narrow way, why would you assume that you will not? One day, wake up in the morning feeling hopeful and at peace, rather than feeling anxious. Yeah, kind of waiting on that myself.
Yeah. Like to wake up happy.
Yeah, I like it. I used to be a highly anxious person, but I am not now. Now, even in difficult times, I have an underlying sense of peace. Maybe love really does drive out all fear. If I could give you that feeling, I would. But unfortunately, it seems that we have to acquire it for ourselves. So all I can give you is my encouragement to actively follow the way of Jesus, because I believe it actually does lead to peace. And if we don't know how to do it, Spirit does.